Gaza War Day 299. Today was Israel's day, you guys. Today was Israel's day, and I assume they will make the most of it. They're already saying things like, as wonderful as it is and as wonderful as it feels to commit these assassinations, you feel empty afterwards. Saw something like that. Um, Israel is also enjoying its victorious day with incidents like the following: an IDF soldier opened fire on his superiors, killing three, and then he shot himself at a military base in southern Israel. So this is Israel reaping the wondrous psychic rewards of what they accomplished today. Let us, before we get into that, at least report from the fronts. After all, the fronts are still active. The West Bank is on strike. There have been 25 different incidents of resistance reported on since the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. I'll get to that, but I want to let's just get through the fronts first. There were shooting operations at Al Khalil, that's otherwise known as Hebron, at the Kiryat Arba settlement, Ramallah, Jenin, Huwara. There's a general strike. As I said, the Israelis committed and left another incursion into Nablus. Okay, Gaza. The Israelis withdrew from Khan Yunis. You probably know that by now, leaving behind unbelievable scenes of atrocities and crimes in their wake. Desolation, destruction, murder, child murder, adult murder, genocide. The combination of all these different forms of murder is genocide. Hundreds of people, destruction of infrastructure, redestruction of infrastructure, because this is the, I don't know, third or fourth time they've invaded Khan Yunis. The invasions of these different cities take the form of raids now. The only parts of Gaza that the Israelis are trying to hold is the Netzarim corridor and the Philadelphia corridor, the border with Egypt, and the southern border between, not border, they've created this corridor to try to separate Gaza City from Khan Yunis, Rafah, etc., the middle camps. So the Israelis are still in those corridors, still getting shelled and rocketed in those corridors and mortared, but they keep trying to cling to them. There's been fighting in Rafah, Merkava tanks, D9s, forces of troops all coming under attack at point blank range. And so all of the usual fighting, mainly focused on Rafah right now. There's still fighting also in Gaza City, Tel El Hawa, especially. I expect you will hear about withdrawal from Tel El Hawa before long. Rafah has been a long one. I suspect you'll hear about withdrawal from Rafah too, but that could be weeks or months away. Um, the corridors will be a tougher nut for the resistance to crack, but I don't think it's sustainable for the Israelis to stay in those corridors under constant rocket fire. So, so that's the reports from the fronts. In all other aspects, I mean, Hezbollah also hit its usual numbers of targets. Um, they hit a whole bunch of Israeli targets just like they do every single day. But in all other respects, as I said, this was Israel's day. So what does that mean? Major leader, Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr was assassinated in an airstrike in Beirut, the capital, the suburbs of Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. So the Israelis took that decision to strike Beirut, despite all of the threats, deterrence attempts by Hezbollah to say that if they strike Beirut, then Hezbollah will also strike into the depth of I mean, then Hezbollah will strike into the depth of Israel. Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, is scheduled to talk tomorrow, probably to commemorate the life of Fuad Shukr, but I'm sure he will also talk about um, where we are in the war now after that assassination. And of course, last night, while I was debating whether to do a sit rep last night about the assassination in Beirut, we heard about the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the political wing of Hamas. He's been all over the news because he's the official spokesperson. He's the open political person. He lives in Qatar. He travels the world. He represents Hamas. He represents the resistance. The major, arguably the leader, um, the major organization in terms of resistance to Israel. He was the political person, the talk, the talking, the person who talks on behalf of the resistance in public. And the fact that he's the public figure like that, the fact that he lives out in the open means that he's just out there. Israel always had the option of killing him if they were willing to take the consequences of doing so. And they have killed so many leaders from Hamas and Hezbollah over the decades. They killed Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, Abdulaziz Rantizi, they killed Imad Mughniyeh, recently they killed Saleh Aruri, they killed they probably killed Iran's president Ibrahim Raisi. They killed Yasser Arafat. This is what they do. They kill leaders. They always kill leaders. They kill leaders whenever they can. And Haniyeh was not living in underground. I mean, underground for the Palestinian resistance means literally underground. It doesn't usually always mean underground. If you're a guerrilla who living underground, that just means you don't have a fixed address and people don't necessarily know who you are. But he was in no way living underground. A lot of the Hamas leaders are. Yahya Sinwar is probably living both literally and figuratively underground. Mohammed Daif is probably living literally underground. They said Fawad Shukr was underground, not again physically, but he was not living, you couldn't look up where Fawad Shukr, the Hezbollah second in command leader, was. You can't look him up in the yellow pages and give him a call or ring the doorbell of his house. He was living a clandestine life, but the Israelis managed to get him in Beirut. They managed to get Haniyeh in Tehran when he was in Tehran for the inauguration of President Pezeshkian after the assassination, probably after the sudden death of Ibrahim Raisi, the previous president, and the election that Iran had. There's been some speculation about who's going to take over from Haniyeh after his death, after his martyrdom. And I saw a Twitter thread with some interesting speculations. I retweeted it. It's on my Twitter somewhere if you want to look. But the person who made the thread was talking about how Haniyeh was one of the more moderates. He was, after all, the point person for negotiations with Israel. He was the one who would have made the deal for the ceasefire and the hostage swap. So now here we are. Israel apparently reaffirmed their commitment to a ceasefire. And as I think Aldan Marki, one of the resistance Twitter accounts that I follow, said, nothing says I want a ceasefire like murdering the person you would be making the ceasefire deal with. They killed a journalist. I think his last name's Al Ghul. He was a young journalist. He was reporting on Haniyeh's murder. He was at Haniyeh's house, and the Israelis targeted his car. He was beheaded by the bombing. The bombing also killed a little kid on a bike. So that's Israel. The United States also did an airstrike on Iraqi resistance, the Popular Mobilization Units, Kataib, Hezbollah, near Bab el Iraq. They killed 4 people. They launched their drone. The Americans launched their drone to kill these people from their base in Kuwait. So they launched a drone from a base in Kuwait and killed these Iraqi resistance fighters who were in support of the Axis of Resistance. So, and the U.S. also rushed naval assets to the Mediterranean to help cover Israel against the revenge that they expect is coming from Lebanon and Iran. So Iran is at the United Nations now. They're giving the United Nations notice that they will be doing something to I don't know, I guess they used the word punish Israel for this assassination. The Ayatollah of Iran said that it's their duty, Iran's duty, to punish Israel because Haniyeh was murdered on Iranian land. So, you guys, on a day like today, I don't really. I know there's a lot of people saying, speculating about what's going to come next and what the resistance kid can do in reply and can do and should do. I'm not, as you probably know, I'm not in the business of telling the resistance what they should do. I also I try to focus on what has happened historically and what is happening now. There's enough difficulty in tracking and analyzing that without getting too deep into what could happen and what can happen and what might happen. But I do have a couple of comments about this tendency. I just feel like today was Israel's day, and I said that a couple times already in this video. Yesterday, or 2 days ago, Israel was coming apart at the seams over the right to rape Palestinian prisoners. They had a soldier, as I said today, kill his superior officer and himself. They are not holding together very well. You do need, I believe, a moral framework to keep a society working. If it's okay to rape prisoners, and a wife of one of the rapists said, "What do I care? He's a Hamas anyway." But if you, as a spouse, think it's okay for your spouse to rape, if you think it's okay to rape, that's not going to stay confined um, to the inferior race as you see it. It's not going to. It's just the casualness that they kill people, the casualness that they kill children. Um, that's not gonna. It's not going to be the building block of a functioning society. The way the Hannibal Doctrine works, where they kill their own people, the way yeah, the way that the torture, the way that they have demonstrations on behalf of torture, the way that they think that any law doesn't apply to them. There's going to be more and more incidents of people, just Israeli Jews, just killing each other because why not? There's going to be people who just have a little bit of a tiff on the road and shoot each other. There's going to be all kinds of things like that, and there will be such a lack of cohesion that resistance spies and resistance intelligence networks will be able to take advantage increasingly, and it will generate formations of soldiers that won't trust each other or be able to function as units or obey orders, because why sacrifice your life when you're just there to commit torture? Why risk your life when you know your companions are have orders to shoot you in the back if you might get captured? So all of this is taking place in Israel and when was demonstrated amply 2 days ago. But yesterday or today, I guess, depending on how you measure the hours, was Israel's day. They got away from what they're not very good at, which is social cohesion and discipline and morale. And they got on to something they are still really good at, which is assassination. And they did really, really skillful assassinations. It can't be denied. Assassinating a VIP target in the capital of Iran, which is a massive, powerful country, is it's an achievement. It's what they're good at, and they did it effectively, assassinating a really important commander of Hezbollah in Lebanon, in the capital of Lebanon. It's an achievement in terms of what they're good at. And you know, I think again on a day like today, the commemoration of these martyrs of Fawad, Shukr, and Haniyeh and Al Ghul too, as a journalist, and I think it's important to talk about what they did and their accomplishments and who they were and martyrs and it's true what they say about martyrs and how martyrs are become symbols and they aren't truly dead and they have a belief system, the resistance does, that makes that true. It's true that these organizational structures persist in spite of leaders getting killed, and the resistance doesn't lose morale. It doesn't fall apart because you kill the leaders. But I while we grieve and you know go through the shock of this feeling of how did they do this? How did they manage to assassinate these people in Tehran and Beirut, during a VIP, event, an inauguration with people from all around the world? How could this happen? How could this have happened? And while you're thinking along those lines, you know, it's a good moment to remember. Like I'm here on this channel to talk about the resistance and all the abilities that the resistance has and all the strategies that the resistance is doing as an anti-colonial struggle, the anti-colonial struggle of our time. And I'm here doing this because I don't want people to despair. I don't want people to only think that this is a one-sided exterminationist campaign. I want people to know that there is a really strategic, really intelligent, militarily um, militarily thoughtful resistance that is developing, that is on a trend, on a trajectory to getting stronger and stronger. I want people to know that geopolitically in the world, there are powers now other than the US. There are powers now other than the Anglo-American Zionist configuration that has had, a unipolar moment for a few decades. And that there are other powers in the world that are want to move the world towards a balance, a multipolar, the idea of multipolar balance, the idea that the US isn't going to be the arbiter of everything that happens in the world forever. But it also, on a night like tonight, it's a good moment to remind ourselves that there is and remains a massive disparity, a monstrous disparity in firepower between the resistance and the imperialists, and the imperialists retain a mind-boggling capacity for destruction and misery, and the resistance does a lot, adapts a lot to not be afraid of this, and that's why um, they have come to value martyrs and value the concept of martyrdom and valorize it. But um, that disparity is there. That disparity is there, and I can't deny it. It's been shrinking, but the only way to test it, the only way to yeah, the only way to test it is by war. And I think the resistance for a long time, I mentioned this clip of Nasrallah's where he talks about a realistic possibility of winning without having a big war. He said this is one of the possibilities. And he talks about a possibility where the US is occupied elsewhere, where Israelis start to leave because there's no economic prospects, and a whole bunch of things go wrong for Israel, and the whole um, freedom for Palestinians just kind of, and for the region, just falls into their lap without a big war. But I think that I don't think that's the timeline we're living in. I don't think that that's where we are. And you know, another thing I said on Twitter today was I don't think we're on the, paraphrasing Yair Lapid, yes, 2 days ago. I don't think we're on the edge of the abyss. I think we're in the abyss. I don't think I don't think Israel opened the gate or is threatening to open the gates of hell with these assassinations. I think we're in hell. I don't think Israel is what's the word? On the brink. I think we're past the brink. I don't think they're on the verge of a regional war. We're in a regional war. And the worst is not yet to come. The worst is here. It's here for the people in Gaza. There's nothing worse than extermination, starvation, deliberate disease, destruction of every single building, deliberate murder of children, destruction of the entire hospital network and school network, and massacring people in tents. It doesn't get worse than that. It just, maybe you could say, we don't want that to happen elsewhere. And who could disagree with that? Certainly not me. I don't want this to happen anywhere else, but I also don't want it to happen in Gaza, and I also want it to stop. And I think as long as 2 million people, minus however many hundreds of thousands the Israelis have already killed, are going through this, I think we're all going through this. I think the world is already in hell. And until it stops, I just I don't see the difference morally between. I'm not willing to make that moral trade-off to think of it as a victory that it's confined only to the people of Gaza, and that's not how. Certainly, that's not how the Houthis think. The Ansar Allah, they've been very explicit about how they don't believe that they um, can stand by, even if that means being bombed. And Ismail Haniyeh himself, before he died, when his grandchildren were murdered by Israel, when his children were murdered by Israel, and his children-in-law were murdered by Israel, he said, "My children are not more valuable than any other children of Gaza." And so, that logic, that logic makes sense to me. And I don't know, what that means in terms of politics, but it's certainly not I'm not scared of things getting worse the way that, people talk about like a regional war that could be really destructive. Like, look at what's happening in Gaza. That's not stopped. It hasn't been stopped. If you stopped it and threatened to restart it, I would I would be very scared of it restarting. But it's happening now, and the only thing that I can think of is stopping it. I don't know exactly if that's clear. I don't know if I'm making as much sense as I should, but my point is hell's already here. Regional war is already here. It's a question of how it's going to escalate, how much worse it's going to get before it gets better. Or I shouldn't say worse because I just explained why I don't think it can get worse. Let's say how much more widely the escalation will take place, how many more areas will be destroyed, how many more lives will be lost before this stops. And that's what's up in the air. Um, so tonight is tonight is that kind of night. I can't there's not much comfort to be to be had on a night like tonight. This was this was Israel's day to enjoy. And what we can do is endure. What we can do is endure and hang in there. Um, and and nobody has stopped. Nobody has surrendered. Um, the struggle goes on against this genocide, and so we will have to continue to do what we can, which is very little, but hang in there, and we'll see you in the next one tomorrow, probably tomorrow night, because Nasrallah is scheduled to speak, and we will have a breakdown of that on this channel when it happens. All right, everybody, hang in there.